On a blistering hot afternoon in southern Texas, where the sun seemed to scorch the very earth beneath it, Jason Reynolds found himself in an unusual position. At 65, Jason had built his life from the ground up. Once a boy who grew up in a small town, he had worked tirelessly through years of ups and downs in the world of real estate, eventually amassing the wealth and influence he now enjoyed. His mansion on the outskirts of Houston, surrounded by lavish gardens and towering gates, was a symbol of his success. But none of that mattered now. There he sat, in his gleaming black Lexus, stranded on a lonely stretch of road miles away from civilization. The heat of the Texas sun felt unrelenting, seeping into the car's interior, and despite the air conditioning running at full blast, Jason could feel beads of sweat forming on his brow. His hands gripped the steering wheel, his thumb tapping against it in irritation, the minutes stretching into what felt like hours. For someone who had become accustomed to control, to having things work out in his favor, this situation was a rare and uncomfortable inconvenience. Jason had always managed to navigate through life with a sense of confidence. His investments, his businesses, his decisions, they all seemed to align perfectly, like pieces of a grand puzzle. He never considered the possibility of being the one in need of help, yet here he was, stuck with a flat tire and no signal on his phone. No one was coming to assist him, and he couldn't help but feel a familiar twinge of frustration gnawing at him. As he sat there, resigned to his situation, Jason's thoughts began to wander. He thought about his past, the long days of hard work, the nights spent in boardrooms making deals, the fleeting moments of success that were always followed by the unrelenting pursuit of more. What had it all been for? The houses, the cars, the accolades, they all seemed so insignificant in this moment as he sat alone in a car that had become just another object in his life, stripped of its glamour by the harsh realities of the road. Then, as if the universe had decided to remind him of something he had forgotten, he saw a figure walking toward him down the road. A young boy no older than 14 was coming toward him, dressed in a faded t-shirt and worn-out sneakers. The boy's gait was steady, purposeful, his face carrying an expression of quiet determination. When the boy finally reached the car, he gave Jason a polite but confident nod. "Got a flat, sir?" the boy asked, his voice steady, without hesitation. Jason, momentarily caught off guard by the boy's maturity, nodded. "Yes, I do," he replied, feeling a strange sense of relief at the sight of someone, anyone, who might help him. The boy smiled slightly. "I can help with that," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Without waiting for further permission, the boy knelt beside the tire and began his work. There was no hesitation in his movements, no sign of doubt or uncertainty. Jason, still sitting in the car, watched as the boy expertly maneuvered the jack, lifting the car with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. As Jason observed the boy, something began to stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just gratitude for the help, but a deeper, more unfamiliar emotion. The boy's confidence, his focus, the simplicity of his actions, it all seemed so pure, so untainted by the complexities of the world Jason had immersed himself in for so long. There was a dignity in the boy's work, an unspoken understanding that it wasn't about wealth or status, but about doing what needed to be done, with integrity and skill. In that moment, Jason couldn't help but feel humbled. The boy had no idea who Jason was. He wasn't doing this for a tip, for recognition, or for any sort of reward. He was simply helping because it was the right thing to do. Jason, for the first time in what seemed like forever, felt a sense of humility wash over him, a reminder of values he had long since forgotten amidst the chase for success and status. As the boy finished, wiping his hands on his jeans and standing up with a satisfied smile, Jason was left speechless. There was a quiet grace about the boy, an unspoken strength that Jason could sense but not fully comprehend. Without a word, the boy turned and started walking back down the road, leaving Jason standing there, a man who had spent decades acquiring wealth and influence, yet now found himself confronted with something much more valuable than money. The simple, unpretentious dignity of a young boy who expected nothing in return for his kindness. Jason watched as the boy, with no fanfare or desire for recognition, walked away down the road. The air around him felt heavier somehow, thick with the weight of a realization he couldn't quite put into words. He had been given something that day, something far more precious than a quick fix for a flat tire. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. As the boy's figure receded into the distance, Jason sat in his car for a few moments longer, staring out the window, lost in thought. What had just happened? Why had this encounter affected him so deeply? He had offered money, a token of appreciation, but the boy had simply refused, not out of reluctance, but because he didn't need it. The words he had spoken were simple, yet they carried the weight of something much more profound. "I don't need anything, sir, just happy to help." It was a sentiment that Jason rarely encountered. The transactions of his life, whether personal or professional, had always been built on the principle of exchange. There was always something given in return for something received, whether that was money, a favor, or a gesture of goodwill. But this was different. The boy's refusal of payment spoke to something Jason hadn't realized he had been missing. It wasn't about transactions, about gaining something in exchange for effort. It was about the simple joy of helping others, of offering something without expecting anything back. Jason found himself wondering how it was possible for someone so young, so seemingly without privilege, to have such an innate understanding of selflessness. It was as though the boy had grasped the essence of what truly mattered in life, something that Jason, in his years of striving and achieving, had long since overlooked. Jason leaned back in his seat, his mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. He had spent decades building an empire, securing wealth, making connections, and filling his life with things that many would envy. Yet, as he sat there in the heat, alone with his thoughts, he realized that none of that had brought him peace. None of it had brought him the sense of purpose that the boy seemed to carry so effortlessly. The boy had nothing to prove to anyone. He didn't need riches or titles to know his worth. His worth was in his actions, in his kindness, in his ability to show up when someone needed help. And that, Jason realized, was far more valuable than anything money could buy. In that moment, Jason understood something profound about life. It wasn't about accumulating things or titles, but about the connections we make and the ways we show up for each other. The boy had reminded him of that, with nothing more than a simple act of kindness. And that reminder was something Jason knew he would carry with him for a long time to come. As the minutes ticked by, the reality of the situation began to settle in. Jason's mind started to shift from the frustration and irritation that had initially consumed him to a sense of gratitude. The boy had offered him something far more enduring than a fixed tire. He had given him a glimpse into the kind of person Jason had forgotten how to be. It was a sobering realization, one that filled him with both a deep sense of longing and a quiet hope. And so, as Jason finally put the car into gear and drove off, the image of the boy lingered in his mind, a symbol of something greater than any wealth or achievement he had ever known. That evening, Jason couldn't shake the image of the boy from his mind. He found himself sitting in his leather chair, surrounded by the cold, sterile comfort of his mansion, staring out at the sprawling lawn. The grandiose estate, with its marble floors and towering ceilings, seemed distant, somehow foreign. The beauty of his surroundings felt shallow in comparison to the memory that kept replaying in his mind. The boy, focused and steady, changing the tire with quiet confidence, offering help not for recognition or gain, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Jason had always believed that success was earned, through effort, strategy, and sometimes sheer force of will. But the boy's actions challenged that belief in a way he hadn't expected. The boy's simplicity, his ease in offering help without any ulterior motive, made Jason realize just how far he had drifted from what truly mattered. In the pursuit of wealth and status, he had forgotten about the inherent goodness that people could offer each other simply by showing up and being present. His entire life had been a constant calculation of how to gain more, achieve more, and become more, but in that moment, none of that felt important. As he sat there, a glass of scotch in hand, Jason thought about the countless deals he had made over the years. His life had been built on exchanges. What could be bought, what could be sold, what was owed, and what was earned. He had always known how to get what he wanted, how to navigate through complex negotiations, how to turn situations to his advantage. But none of that mattered to the boy. Elijah had no knowledge of Jason's business empire, no idea of the wealth that Jason had spent years accumulating. He was simply a boy, living in a small town, helping someone because they needed it. Jason realized that the boy had given him something he hadn't even known he was missing, a sense of perspective. It wasn't about the things we acquire or the power we wield. It was about the kindness we show others, the way we treat those around us, regardless of their status or position in life. The boy's humility had touched Jason in a way that no business deal, no luxury purchase, and no amount of success ever had. For the first time in years, Jason felt a profound sense of gratitude for something he couldn't measure with money. And as Jason reflected on his own life, he wondered when he had stopped valuing the simple, unspoken connections that made life meaningful. When had he become so focused on status and wealth that he had lost sight of the fundamental truth that it was the kindness, the selflessness, and the integrity of people like Elijah that truly shaped the world? The boy had reminded him of the importance of those values, the values that Jason had once learned as a child but had gradually forgotten as his life became consumed by the pursuit of more. The next morning, Jason couldn't get the boy out of his mind. He found himself longing for the simplicity and clarity that Elijah seemed to possess. His thoughts swirled with questions about the boy's life. What kind of person had raised him? How had he come to understand the importance of helping others without expecting anything in return? And more than anything, Jason found himself yearning to understand how he could reconnect with those same values, the ones that Elijah seemed to live by so effortlessly. As he sat down at his desk, making calls to business partners and contractors as usual, Jason felt an overwhelming urge to find the boy again. He knew that something had changed within him, something that couldn't be fixed with more wealth or more accomplishments. It was something deeper, something that had to do with connection, with giving rather than receiving. The boy had reminded him of the man he used to be, the one who cared for others, the one who wasn't just focused on climbing higher, but on lifting others up along the way. Jason found himself pulling away from his usual routine, making mental notes to visit the town of Harlan where the boy had lived. He had an inexplicable need to thank the boy. Not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. Something inside him had shifted. It wasn't just about changing a flat tire. It was about a fundamental shift in perspective, a reminder that the most important things in life could never be measured in dollars or deals, but in the small, selfless acts of kindness that truly define a person's character. The following morning, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him had shifted overnight. The thoughts of Elijah, the boy who had so effortlessly restored his faith in simple kindness, filled his mind. He knew he had to see him again. A need he couldn't quite explain pushed him forward. Something inside him felt unsettled, unfinished. He couldn't simply let this moment pass. The way the boy had acted, the way he had offered his help without asking for anything in return. It left a lasting impression on Jason's heart, one he couldn't ignore. Jason had spent years chasing success, working late nights, making tough decisions, negotiating deals that many could only dream of. In doing so, he had built a life that others admired, a life that from the outside seemed to have everything. But as the years went by, he found himself isolated, surrounded by empty accolades, but lacking the human connections that gave life meaning. The boy, Elijah, had shown him a truth Jason had forgotten, that the greatest satisfaction doesn't come from wealth or achievements, but from relationships, from moments of genuine human connection. The boy had given Jason something priceless, a reminder of what truly mattered. It wasn't the expensive suits or the polished cars that defined him. It was the person he was, the choices he made, and how he treated others. And it wasn't just about what Jason could offer the boy, but what the boy had offered him. It was the purity of his heart, the sincerity of his actions, and the depth of his humility. Jason had spent his entire life building walls, fortifying his world with wealth, and in the process, he had pushed away the very things that made life worth living. Now, standing at the edge of his driveway, Jason felt a deep longing to reconnect with the simplicity that Elijah embodied. He longed for the authenticity and honesty that had been so evident in their brief exchange. He realized that for years he had been running away from the very things that gave life its deepest meaning: humility, compassion, and the simple joy of helping others. Determined to understand more, Jason set out for Harlan, the small town where Elijah had lived. It wasn't an easy decision. He wasn't one to venture out of his comfort zone, especially not for something as intangible as gratitude. But something inside him urged him forward. Maybe he could find Elijah again, not to repay him, but to understand him, to understand the strength of character that could turn a simple act of kindness into a life-changing moment for someone else. The drive to Harlan was long and winding, but it gave Jason time to think, to reflect on the choices he had made and the person he had become. As he drove through the rolling hills and past small towns, Jason felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. What would he find when he got there? Would Elijah's family even welcome him? What could he say to express the depth of his gratitude? When Jason finally arrived in Harlan, he felt strangely out of place. The town was small, humble, with houses that looked nothing like his grand estate. Yet there was a warmth in the air, a sense of community that Jason hadn't experienced in years. He visited diners and gas stations, asking around about the boy, seeking any trace of Elijah. It wasn't long before an elderly woman at a small cafe recognized the description. "Sounds like Elijah," she said with a knowing smile. "He's always helping folks around here. Lives with his mama over on the other side of town." Jason nodded, making a mental note. Elijah had made an impression on everyone he met, not because of his appearance or status, but because of the heart he carried with him. There was something different about the way people spoke of him, a quiet reverence, an understanding that the boy was someone special, someone who could make a difference without even trying. Jason felt a new sense of awe building in his chest. The boy had become a symbol, not just of kindness, but of everything that Jason had overlooked in his own life. As Jason made his way to the small house on the outskirts of town, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. What would he find? Would he find the answers he was looking for? Jason stood outside Elijah's home, taking in the modest surroundings with a mixture of awe and reverence. The house, a small, weathered structure with a sagging porch and peeling paint, was far from the opulence he was used to. Yet, in some inexplicable way, it felt alive, filled with a warmth and vitality that his grand mansion could never offer. As he stepped onto the uneven path leading to the front door, a sense of humility washed over him. This house, though humble, was a testament to resilience, to a family that had built something meaningful out of what they had and not what they lacked. The door creaked open and Jason was greeted by Elijah's mother, a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes but a welcoming smile. There was a quiet strength in her presence, an energy that radiated warmth and love despite the obvious signs of struggle. Jason couldn't help but feel like an outsider in her world, yet there was a certain peace that surrounded her, a peace he longed for in his own life. The stark contrast between this home and his own mansion struck him deeply, and it made him reflect on the emptiness he had often felt, surrounded by luxury but disconnected from the things that truly mattered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle yet direct, a reflection of the life she had lived, a life that had taught her how to balance strength with kindness, humility with grace. "I'm looking for Elijah," Jason said, his voice uncertain, as if he were unsure of his place in this new world he had entered. I wanted to thank him again for helping me the other day." She nodded, as if this was a familiar request, and stepped aside to let him in. The warmth of the home was palpable, not from the heating or the appliances, but from the genuine love that seemed to permeate every corner. There was no luxury here, no fine furniture or expensive decor. Instead, the space was filled with family photos, hand-drawn pictures from Elijah, and a few modest trinkets that told the story of a life well lived. Not in terms of wealth, but in terms of love, community, and hard-earned joy. Jason followed her into the backyard, where Elijah was working on the fence, his small hands skillfully maneuvering tools with an ease that surprised him. The boy looked up, his expression one of mild curiosity, as if he didn't expect anyone to visit. "Hey, mister," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Jason smiled, feeling the weight of his purpose here. He hadn't prepared for this moment, hadn't planned on what he was going to say. "I just wanted to thank you again," he said, his voice softer now. "You helped me when I really needed it, and I don't think I properly appreciated that at the time." Elijah shrugged, a modest smile tugging at his lips. "It wasn't a big deal," he replied, his tone light, almost as if the concept of helping wasn't something he thought twice about. It was simply what you did for others when they needed it. Jason felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude swell inside him, but also a pang of regret. The boy's humility, his ease in doing good without expecting anything in return, contrasted sharply with the transactional nature of Jason's own life. He had spent years building an empire, making deals, calculating risks, and securing his wealth. Yet here was a boy, with none of the privilege or resources that Jason had, yet giving in a way that was pure, untainted by expectations. It made Jason realize that the real value in life wasn't found in what you owned, but in the connections you made, the impact you had on others, and the quiet integrity you carried. "You're a good kid," Jason said, his voice filled with an unexpected emotion. "Your mom must be proud." Elijah's eyes shifted to the house, and he nodded. "She works hard. I just try to help out when I can." Jason looked past Elijah, taking in the patchwork fence and the worn swing set in the yard. It was clear that Elijah's family didn't have much, but they had something far more valuable: strength, resilience, and a deep sense of community. It wasn't about what they lacked, but about what they made of what they had. And in that moment, Jason felt a longing to contribute, to somehow show his gratitude for what Elijah had taught him in the simplest of ways. "I'd like to do something for you and your family," Jason said, his voice firm yet gentle. "Not because you need anything, but because what you did for me meant something. It meant a lot." Elijah looked at him, a mix of curiosity and hesitation in his gaze. "We're okay, mister," he said, his voice steady. "We don't need anything." Jason smiled softly, understanding. "It's not about need. It's about what's right." He paused, searching for the right words. "You showed me something that I'd forgotten. You showed me what really matters in life. I'd like to give something back." In that moment, Jason realized that this wasn't just about a house or a family in need. It was about a deeper understanding of life, of connection, of selflessness. And it was something that Jason knew he could never turn his back on again. The boy's simple act of kindness had changed everything, and Jason was determined to honor that. Over the next several weeks, Jason's life began to change in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The simple act of kindness that Elijah had shown him, without any expectation of reward, had ignited something inside him. It wasn't just the renovations or the way he helped Elijah's family that made a difference. It was the shift in perspective that had occurred within him. Jason realized that for so many years he had lived his life chasing after more success, more wealth, more status. But in his pursuit of all those things, he had lost sight of what really mattered: the connections we make with others, the relationships we cultivate, and the selfless acts of kindness that make life truly meaningful. Jason made a commitment to himself that day to live with more purpose, to show up for others the way Elijah had shown up for him. He began to look at the world through a different lens. Every encounter, every person he met, became an opportunity to give something back, to show kindness and gratitude, no matter how small the gesture. It was as though the simple, unpretentious dignity that Elijah had embodied had seeped into his soul, reminding him that life was not about accumulating things, but about contributing to something greater than himself. As the renovations on Elijah's home were completed, Jason watched as the family marveled at the transformation. The porch was sturdy now, the fence was repaired, and the new swing set stood proudly in the backyard. The house, once worn and weathered, now radiated life. And yet, it wasn't just the physical changes that struck Jason the most. It was the joy in Elijah's eyes as he saw his family thriving, the way his mother's face softened with gratitude, and the laughter that echoed through the house. These were the moments that Jason would remember for the rest of his life. These were the moments that reminded him of what truly mattered. As the final touches were added to the house, Jason found himself not only more connected to the family, but to a deeper sense of purpose in his own life. He began to return to Harlan regularly, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. He spent time with Elijah, mentoring him in the ways of business and life, showing him that success was not about power or wealth, but about character and integrity. Elijah, in turn, began to blossom, his curiosity about construction growing into a true passion. Watching the boy take an interest in learning, in growing, filled Jason with a sense of pride he had never known before. In a quiet moment, as they stood together on the porch of the newly renovated home, Elijah turned to Jason and said, "I want to help people like you helped us. I want to give back one day too." Jason smiled, placing a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "You already are, Elijah. Your kindness set all of this in motion. Don't ever lose that." As the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, Jason realized that the journey he had embarked on wasn't just about fixing a house. It was about fixing his own heart. The boy had taught him that true wealth wasn't measured by money or possessions, but by the love, compassion, and kindness we share with others. If you've been moved by this story, if you've felt the profound impact that a simple act of kindness can have, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. How can you show up for others today? How can you contribute to something greater than yourself? If this story has inspired you, please subscribe to the channel for more content like this and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this journey together, learning from each other and growing in kindness and compassion. You never know what small act of kindness might change your life forever.